to go, you're a moron. No, that's not the way it is. And that's the sunshine they cannot take. They cannot take being called out and shown what the facts are.
Well, it's the same thing when our people's like, oh my God, you're in the boule. Y'all control Black America. Shut up. It's just a lie. You're in the fraternity. Oh, you guys are the secret society. I'm like,
that's not the way it is. And that's the sunshine they cannot take. They cannot take being called out and shown what the facts are.
well, it's the same thing when our people's like, oh my God, you're in the boule. Y'all control Black America. Shut up. It's just a lie. You're in the fraternity. Oh, you guys are the secret society. I'm like, shut the hell up. I slam them, the Illuminati, all these crazy people because you're
called out and shown what the facts are.
Well, it's the same thing when our people's like, oh my God, you're in the boule. Y'all control Black America. Shut up. It's just a lie. You're in the fraternity. Oh, you guys are the secret society. I'm like, shut the hell up. I slam them, the Illuminati, all these crazy people because you're right. It's planting seeds of distrust. And this is why if you, all of our entertainers out there and our sports figures, it has to be literally a community saying we are going to have disinfectant and we're going to sit here and go after all of you and blast you and wipe you out because they're trying to sow seeds of discontent to keep us from voting because they know the power of our vote. And that's how in Michigan, he won in Pennsylvania, he won in Wisconsin, he won in Ohio, in North Carolina, in Florida, because Black people, our votes were down. I'm not saying the election was it was all about us, but when we don't vote in significant numbers, then our power is simply going to waste.
Let's talk about the spook who locked the door. Not sat by it, but he locked that shit. And the delegitimizing of Black political voices. Let's talk about that real quick. So, when I do go to certain Black media spaces and I see them talking about politics and they're doing the stick, I admit I do be surprised sometimes when I look at the Breakfast Club comment section when Angela Rye's on there or, you know, some Black Democrat is talking out their asses on there. I am sometimes shocked. Like, yo, because there are Black people pushing back. It's not, you know, like looking at the root.com's comment section or now Black Voices. Man, I remember when Black Voices was like not all pro LBGT XYZ and there was more debate, at least on the Facebook pages. I don't know what happened, but then like the root writers started writing over there and then just went to hell. And now it's the same thing. But sometimes you do be like, damn, I'm proud of you people. I might not agree with you politically, but at least there's some pushback, some nuance in these conversations online. But looking at the response from the so-called bourgeoisie and the Black elites and what have you, and just the typical Black folks on that Democrat plantation, they're trying to silence voices of people who have different opinions. And regardless of where you fall on the political ideological line, you shouldn't co-sign that. Because what we have here is, as you see with Yvette Cornell and her followers, Twitter is now blocking the ADOS hashtag and like deleting their tweets. We already know how Facebook is grimy and they've been attacking people who speak about Black empowerment and whatnot. So you have these corporations somewhat siding with these Black so-called bourgeoisie elites and shutting them down and getting their stuff banned and whatnot. That's not, I'm saying that regardless of where you stand on the political ideology, that's not cool. But like I was trying to say before, I go into some of these comment sections when I notice that they're talking down their ass, I troll, but I'm not really trolling. I'm just telling the truth and giving a nuanced perspective. And of course, the Black person will call you a troll, whoever it is, if you disagree. That happens all the time on News One. Roland Martin, well, he's not a part of that anymore, but like on News One, they'll post these BS biased articles, clickbait stuff like all Black media does. And you go in there and say, well, this and that happened. And the person will say, oh, you're a troll. This happened right here. This was actually from Yarima Karam, who is a former associate of Boyce Watkins, the brother who was formerly incarcerated, who talks about criminal justice often. He posted and broke down not Yvette Cornell, but the Kamala Harris. He broke down her record as AG and as a top cop and as a district attorney. And he was just going fact by fact by fact, stuff that you can look up yourself. It's not like it's deep, hidden, dark information. He didn't attack, again, her biracialness. He didn't attack her half-blackness. He just stuck to her record, and yet he got called a Russian bot. And as you see with Joy AM, who's another person who's non-ADOS, but she gets to operate in the black space. You got Angela Rye, the as I like to call her, Bright Girl Magic. Participating in cock blocking on the people who are focused on reparations and that type of politics. And they're helping places like Facebook and Google and Twitter remove these people from using their voices to spread their messages. And again, no matter where you stand politically, that should not be cool. But this was the comment. So he responded to Yarima Karam's video breaking down Kamala Harris's record. Again, all stuff that you can look up, Googleable, not that deep, not that far-fetched. He said, so the Russian propaganda has begun. Ignorant black folks will scoop it up like ice cream. My simple response was stop insulting the intelligence of black people. Instead of blaming Russia, why don't you just look it up? Which is what the brother kept saying in the video. Look it up. He said it after every point he made. He said, look it up. And this is where we are today, politics-wise. You have this dismissiveness of black voices over Russia instead of actually having a dialogue and debate with black people who are making these points. There's not like you can go look up and see who started what. Yvette Cornell is being accused of being a Russian bot by Angela Rye, when no, that ADOS stuff, that's Tone Talks, that's Yvette Cornell. Again, regardless of how you feel about their politics, which I don't agree with a lot of shit they say, that was their thing. And that's something I think that many black people, regardless of political views, whether you're a Democrat, independent, or a Republican, or conservative, whatever, you can rock with that part of the message. Like, yo, we trying to be selfish with our politics. We want to focus on this issue. Here's our demands. I don't think, for the most part, not the commentators on TV, because there's a lot of fuck shit with that. A lot of people just getting their bag and whatever on both sides of the aisle. I'm talking about real black folks who care about their communities and whatnot. They can rock with that message. It's like, yo, let's deal with that. But I want to also talk about this other part, which the spook who locked the door. Let's talk about that guy too. So here we are again with the Boule Bird and another black liberal. I call this brother the spook by the door, not the racial epithet that's how Roland Martin says it. Not the racial epithet spook, but he's actually a spy boy, NSA, CIA, one of them alphabet boys. Spook, that's what we call him in the intelligence agency realm. But when I first saw this brother, I thought, okay, he's another anti-Trumper, a secret weapon of the liberals, a dude who served his country, who decorated, black too. So it's like, when you critique him, criticize him, you got to come correct. Not to mention the motherfucker's a spook. So, yeah, he can go missing or whatnot. Now, most spooks, when they get out of office or retire, they don't go on TV being all political. They go in the private sector to make that bag, or they hide because, it's dangerous revealing your identity after you've engaged in certain activities. But he wants to be the spook that locked the door. Now, at first, I thought, boom, he's not, he's a legit dude. He's not biased. Then I'm like, all right. Then he starts going in and in and in and deeper and deeper. I'm like, wait a minute, this dude is kind of sounding biased. He doesn't sound like, it's one thing to dislike Trump, but then when you start caping for Hillary, I'm like, whoa, slow down. And on this segment with Roland, he reveals that he was caping for Hillary. Even Roland tried to correct him and get him say, the porky pig thing he does. This is not about voting Democrat. This is about blah, blah, blah. No, this brother was seriously saying it was about voting Democrat. And the thing is, they conflated situations where, yes, Russia did do what they did and imitating being black folks and doing things with the memes or whatever. First of all, politics is all about slinging mud and the lies are more entertaining than the truth. It's not about what's true. It's just what it's a headline. Like, that's already a part of politics, right? And unfortunately, Democrats, this new wave of slinging mud or slinging dirt, are memes. So it's almost like they're mad at the fact that Facebook and social media are used to spread these things. I'm like, well, y'all just got behind the game. Y'all lost that round, right? So it's just a tool to spread out disinformation. Instead of just doing a headline where you show Mitt Romney pushing the old person on the cart and throwing him over the bridge, it's no difference, right? But Democrats lost that battle because of not just Russian bots, but people who just didn't mess with Hillary, right? You ran a bad candidate. Y'all don't want to admit that. Y'all want to blame Russia and black people and the white women and y'all want to blame everybody, but the fact that y'all picked a shitty ass candidate is what it is. But this brother goes on and he talks about, man, I've been in barbershops in Philly and I hear black men. So wait a minute, you hear black men saying the same things that you're accusing the Russians of doing. Wouldn't it connect to you that maybe these black men feel that way? They think that way? Whether you agree or not, if brother said, I'm not voting for a woman, who is that your business to tell them to operate otherwise? That's not your concern. There's American people, men and women, who don't subscribe to female leadership. Let that go. Like, what if that's true? What can you do about that? You can't stop them from voting. That's their right to do so. Again, I can respect the fact that he was non-biased and was like, yo, this is what the intelligence report said. It said that they targeted black people. Y'all making it seem like black people are dumb as shit and they were just falling for the okie doke. No, many black people agreed with what the Russians were doing. They felt the same way about Hillary. So it was a mutual beneficial situation, right? And this is what Roland did that's so tricky. And he's good at it. Now, that's correct. He's the motherfucker good. He talked about how Angela Davis and the Communist Party and whatnot, and how they work together. There was a time back during the Black Panthers era where there were more militant groups within that arena who were rocking with the Russians. Roland Martin jumps out the window and says, no, this ain't the same Russia. Like, he tried to say that those were good Russians and the ones today are bad. No, he said his verbatim words was Vladimir Putin is a white supremacist. I'm like, you got receipts? You got proof? You're a journalist, dog. You can't just say shit like that. You got to back it up with something. He's like, no. So he's interjecting his own thoughts and beliefs instead of being a journalist and giving research and examples and saying he did this, and that. That's why I feel he's a white supremacist or whatever. Now, no. Thinking now, of course we don't want to overthrow this system and replace it with Russians. Like, that's just trading supremacy. Like, that's just dumb. But historically, there was an element of black society that was rocking with the Russians and vice versa. No, we don't believe that they had our best interest in, but it was two parties that had a mutual beneficial goal. The black people were like, yo, our government not fucking with us. They're not treating us right. Russia saw that and they used it to capitalize. And black folks saw that and they used Russia's influence to do this, to go back both ways. That did happen. Right? The whole McCarthyism thing, Dr. King was accused of being a communist. Now, my thing is this. He had some views that were communist. I think a lot of black people are socialist in their worldview and communist and anti-capitalism because some black folks can't separate capitalism from slavery. So, I'm not saying King was a communist, but he did rock with some of them. He did have many of them as allies on his, platform. Like, that's just facts. Like, you can't deny that. I don't think he was one, but he did rock with them. And I think a lot of black folks subscribe to that worldview anyways. That's what this matriarchy bullshit is about too. But I thought it was disingenuous how Roland tried to minimize the role of blacks working with Russians in the past, or contemplated like, yo, our government really not rocking with us. Here's the thing we can do. The Americans actually showed that the TV show Americans, right, with the Russians, they actually showed the brother who played Antoine Fisher. He was rocking with the Russians and being an informant or whatever. He was working with them. Of course, he died in the show, but there needs to be more of an education on how that went down and what that was all about. Instead of just Roland Martin oversimplifying it, saying, speaking like Porky the Pig and trying to just wash over the fact that did exist. That did happen. Again, no, we don't want to overthrow one system and replace it with another, but there were people who had mutual beneficial agendas, and there was that relationship that did happen. Now, this brother get to come out and put on his Captain American flag and say the American people this and that. While, like, in essence, he sounds more like a Republican than most black people because he's all right, pro America. You should support that. Do I believe that the Russians did it? Yes, but at the same time, I believe that many black people believe some of the same things that were being said. So what? This idea that, oh, they hacked our election. We overthrow governments all the time. The beauty of what Trump did on Fox News when he was being interviewed and he was talking about Russia and they were trying to get him to, I don't understand this either because, like, Trump has done things specifically to shit on Russia and cockblock Vladimir Putin. Like, he's done things that, regardless of what he says, what he's done, like arming certain people, disarming people, cock blocking. He's done things specifically that Putin's not happy about. But for whatever reason, the Democrats are trying to out-Republic him, and how he should respond to Trump. Which basically they're making him seem like they want to go to World War III to prove that he's not in cahoots or what have you, whatnot. But when Trump was on Fox, he had said something about, well, what about Russia? The dude interviewed him and he goes, well, we got killers too. And I love the way all these conservative war hawks, John McCain's daughter and all them were clutching their pearls. Well, how dare he point out that we got killers too? Yes, the same undermining, effing with the system, destabilizing countries. We do all that same shit too. So those are just facts. And that's the cognitive dissonance of a lot of white conservatives when it comes to warmongering. And, like, you can't be mad at illegal immigration when we participate by dropping bombs that was, on these different countries. And then these motherfuckers want to be refugees and come into the country. Like, you can't go over there blowing up shit and then get mad when these people want to come here, right? Like, Obama, as much as we want to, I don't co-sign them coming here, right? If you want to help people, you help them with foreign policy in their own countries. You don't bring them here. But if you blow them up all their shit, a lot of those Syrians, like, yo, Obama, you drop bombs all over our families. You was dropping bombs on our birthdays and bar mitzvahs and parties and shit. Not bar mitzvahs, they're Muslim. But, you were blowing shit up with impunity. Drop, 3,600 bombs in just in 17 alone? Like, their countries are all messed up. There's some responsibility from America for that, absolutely. I don't think you should be able to come here and cut in front of the line and all that shit, but there's some things that need to be done for that. But that's the intellectual dishonesty of conservatives, when you can do all that shit and then be like, nope, you can't come here. Something has to be done. You can't just destroy and build and then wonder why more of those motherfuckers don't want to come here and be like, kaboom. But that's beside the point. America does engage in regime change. We destabilize. We mess with people's elections all the time. So it's happened to us, and y'all want people to act like we're fake patriotic and be mad about that? Like, that's part of the game. That's the nature of the beast. During Obama's administration, it was China hacking our elections. China hacked Sony and all that stuff. All those things happened during his election. So, during his administration. So, it's like, it happened. It always happens. It's always going to be happening. That's the future of warfare. It's cyber attacks. It ain't going to be about boots on the ground and killing people. It's going to be about attacking, nuclear facilities computer-wise and blowing up satellites. That's the future of war. Again, I'm not happy that, it happens or it would affect us, but we do it to them too. So it's all fair and love and war. Pun intended. But this segment illustrated how dumb these people think black people are. In particular, black men. He's really up here chastising black men for saying why they didn't want to vote for Hillary. Like, again, I could see if people were saying things that weren't true, but the things that Hillary's being critiqued of, specifically from black men, super predator, how she talked about working with free slave labor and at the governor's mansion, how she mocked the people who lost their homes during the mortgage crisis. You know that black folks lost half of their wealth due to that. some of it culpability on them, but many of it was because of the policies that her husband implemented. And then she's taking money from the same banks that destroyed them in the country and giving speeches and making $250,000. Like, those were valid critiques of crooked ass Hillary. But you let this brother tell it, no, 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 that's the Russian bots. They bamboozled you, they tricked you. And again, that rhetoric, that language that he's spewing, that Angela Rye is spewing, that Joy Reid is spewing, is giving these social media companies the right to block and silence your voices and not let you be heard. And again, no matter what side of the aisle you on, you should not co-sign that. This brother's mad biased, and I think he's dangerous being that he's a spook. And he has credibility. So people are gonna take his word with more validity, it seems.
Dissent among African Americans. They were targeting African Americans in the case with Bernie Sanders versus Hillary Clinton.
Well, in fact, they were targeting the United States from many, many different perspectives. But now that we see through this report, African Americans had a very particular role that the Russians themselves wanted to use in order to damage Hillary Clinton. And as you say, we've been going at this for 2 years, 6 months, where certainly myself and Joyanne Reid on MSNBC have been hammering that this was a Russian at this for 2 years, 6 months, where certainly myself and Joyanne Reid on MSNBC have been hammering that this was a Russian operation, Clinton. And as you say, we've been going at this for 2 years, 6 months, where certainly myself and Joyanne Reid on MSNBC have been hammering that this was a Russian operation from the very beginning. So now we know definitively that the Russia's Internet Research Agency did this campaign in order to get Donald Trump elected. But the voter suppression aspect of it, specifically targeting African Americans' fears, and we know our community, sometimes we can, you know, the base of the Democratic Party is really African American women. And the place that we saw most of the true impact were amongst African American men. I had people in my own barber shop in Philadelphia tell me they weren't going to vote for Hillary Clinton because she was the lesser of two evils. She had blood on her hands. She's a corporatist. She didn't really care about African Americans. All of those themes are in the Senate report.
Where's the lie though? What in that Senate report is incorrect? You said you had black men, so he gave black women the pass, the gynocracy that we are under politically. So he took them off the wall. Like, black women are fine; they give their 96%, whatever. But the black men who look at her policies, so again, you can't look at NAFTA, you can't look at TTP, you can't look at those policies that they hurt white men. So what do you think they do to black men? And say, I'm not voting for her because of those things. Why is it that that's some type of Russian bot trickery to say those things?
And that the Russians had specifically targeted African Americans. Now, you have to understand, this goes back a long time. Back when the Soviet Union had the KGB, their intelligence organization, many of their campaigns were designed to split the black voter away from the United States government.
Why were they trying to split the black vote away from the American government? What was going on in that time in the 60s with the black people in the American government? Why would they feel that they could get black people to get away from the See, like, you can't have this conversation without being this fake patriot person, which I'm sure he is that guy because he served and he did all that spook shit. But I'm saying you're not going to address why there was an environment for the Russians to feel that they could come in and convince black people to be away from against their own government. Come on, spook guy. Come on, spookity spook. You gotta mention that part as well.
One of their earliest ones or not earliest, the most successful disinformation campaign they did was early in the AIDS epidemic in the 1980s. The Russians made up the rumor that AIDS was actually a weapon created by the CIA to destroy the black and gay community. There are whole websites on the internet with that rumor today. So the Russians understood that race was going to be a very important component of this campaign. Donald Trump was going to be the vessel of American hatred, and that's how he was going to win through the white vote. So they had to assist him by suppressing the black vote, and getting African Americans to vote against their own interests, and they did.
And we saw Malcolm. Look,
What do you mean by vote against their own interests? So black men who are pro-gun and Hillary's not pro-gun, how did they vote against their own interests? Black women who are pro-school choice and Hillary, a Democrat, is anti-school choice, like most of them. How is that against their own interests? Black people who don't co-sign open borders, DACA, illegal immigration, how is that against, like, that's the problem with the so-called bourgeoisie Negroes. The so-called boule is they think they can speak for other black folks and they're just dumb and don't know what they're talking about. You're telling people that they're voting against their own interests. How can you dictate what someone else's interest is? You share that interest. You want open borders. You don't care what it looks like to have illegal immigration on demand. You support gun control, for which I don't understand how you could, if you are the spook guy who's overthrown, helped arm other countries. How could you support gun control in your own country when you've been a part of missions to help arm other people overthrow their own government? That doesn't make sense to me. Again, you can't dictate what black folks' issues are and what is to their benefit. You can't make that decision. It's like you can't tell white people voting. You can't tell white people they're voting against their own interests because they make up their own interest. You don't get to dictate that. But that's one of the problems with the so-called black elite. They think they speak for everybody else. That talented Tiff Negro shit.
I can remember just the deluge of comments on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. Oh, super predators, and she doesn't care about black people.
Comment, right?
And then when you see, now granted, first of all, that there were people who were legitimately black people who we know, who were activists.
A lot of them are
also were raising those issues. But to your point about black men, the numbers are clear. 94% of black women voted for Hillary Clinton. There was a 9-point gap that existed between black men and black women for Donald Trump.
And it's the Russians' fault for that 9-point gap.
There also was a 9-point gap that existed between black men and black women for Romney and Obama. And so to your point about what the Russians were doing, this whole deal of targeting again, and you're right, what black men were saying more than anybody else, she's evil, absolutely, she doesn't care about black people, remember what she said about Obama, and it was just this constant messaging, and it showed up in the research because it was the people who were 18 to 29 who had the lowest turnout among African Americans. That's who they were targeting.
So what are you saying? That it's black men's fault that crooked Hillary? We've already heard you say that. You've given black women their credit. So black women are smart. They voted Democrat. I don't know what they got for it. I mean, the candidate lost. They gave them all their votes, and she lost. And a small percentage of black men voted for Trump. He won. Whatever. So what is the point here, though? What are you trying to make the point of? The Russians made those black men not vote the way they voted, or the Russians could convince black men to do this, but they couldn't convince black women? Like, I'm confused here.
Saying more than anybody else, she's evil, absolutely, she doesn't care about black people, remember what she said about Obama, and it was just this constant messaging, and it showed up in the research because it was the people who were 18 to 29 who had the lowest turnout among African Americans. That's who they were targeting.
That's right. And those people were actually Bernie Sanders, supporters and people who were experimenting with the Bernie Sanders camp, which was another component of this black voter suppression campaign, which was to say, don't vote for Hillary Clinton, vote for Bernie Sanders, or even worse, Jill Stein. There was a meme that was in the Senate report that was put out on African American channels showing Hillary Clinton with the super predators comment and white hands covered with blood, red blood, and it said Hillary Clinton under it. Then below it, they had these sort of brown, tannish hands that said Jill Stein with no blood, like Jill Stein was a black candidate. Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, literally sat at the table with Vladimir Putin, and is now in retrospect, many consider her. Whoops, sorry about that. In retrospect, many consider her a Russian-backed candidate.
And
Do you realize how stupid he's calling black men? So again, they're attacking the people who didn't vote, saying the Russians made y'all not vote. Then the people who supported Bernie, the Russians made y'all do that too. And then if you even, God forbid, went for Jill Stein, it was the Russians' fault as well. None of y'all thought for yourselves. None of y'all did your research on candidates, looked at policy. It was all the Russians' fault. They did all that shit. And then he talking about Jill Stein and the Russians, whatever. Who did the nuclear deal with Russia? Who did that? Oh, your girl crooked ass Hillary. She was the Secretary of State during that deal under Obama's administration. She did the deal with them for nuclear weapons. And yet, Jill Stein is this person backed by Russia? That's kind of hilarious, dog.
And the thing that really was amazing, if you will, when you look at what took place all throughout this campaign, it was constant. It was constant. It was constant. This is not to say that there were not African Americans who did not like Hillary Clinton. It is not to say there were African Americans who were not supportive of Bernie Sanders. And yes, there were some African Americans who were supporting Jill Stein legitimately. But what you had here, though, was you had the Russians. And I remember, Malcolm, on my Periscope feeds, all of a sudden, all of these Russian accounts flooding my Periscope feeds. And I'm sitting here blocking, and I'm sitting there going, what the? It ain't like, what the hell? How all of a sudden Roland Martin is so popular with folks from Russia? I saw that constantly in 2015, 2016.
And absolutely. And the funny part about it is that here we are rolling into 2019, getting ready for our next election. We have just seen the true strength of the African American voter come to its fore. But once again, it was African American women who saved the Democratic Party in this last election, who, in fact, as I've written in my book, they've saved democracy, because this election was a referendum on whether the American experiment was going to continue or it was going to shift into autocracy. The Russians understood the strength of oppression in the United States, and they've known it for decades. And they decided to use that on one hand to suppress votes, but on the other hand, and I documented this in my book, Plot to Destroy Democracy, I documented where they were marionetting or using American citizens like puppets, hiring people on Craigslist in order to do political activities. And people thought that they were being hired by a white American to do political activities in order to advance African American causes. And it was actually some kid 12 hours out in St. Petersburg, Russia, who understood fluent English, understood had studied African American culture, knew what the issues were, but all of their themes were crafted by a foreign intelligence agency. It's going to be very hard to get that through the head of a lot of the knuckleheads in our community. But
the knuckleheads
in
our community,
talking about, right? The guys who won't believe anything. The guys who, like I said, in my barbershop, literally sat in front of my face and said, well, Donald Trump said, what have we got to lose? Now we know what we have to lose. right? But now we also know that we were taken advantage of. We were manipulated. And we need to start saying that and saying it loud because people make a joke out of it like, oh, it didn't really happen. Who, what, the Russians did it? We found in this report the Russians were mocking us with the phrase, what do you think the Russians did it? And it was actual Russian entities pretending to be Americans mocking us about Russia's interference. They have harnessed freedom of speech as a guided weapon system pointed at the heart of democracy. But first, I guess they decided to kill off the black voter, you know, as that, and to, uh, separate us from democracy because they thought we were easy. And I think that now that this information is out, there should be a backlash. In fact, a blacklash against any of these memes that are trying to split us from the party. And I'm not talking about,
Even if you wanted to take him as a legit person, you just heard what he said. This Russians try to split us from the party. You can't take anything he said serious now. Like, what do you mean us? Who is us? So the Russians made people not vote. They made people vote third party. They made people vote for Bernie. And they try to split you away from the Democratic Party. Everything they said that they mentioned, Crooked Hillary with the super predators, not caring about black people, like, is that not stuff that you could point out that's factual? Yeah, I didn't mention any propaganda or lie that the Russians did to black voters, to black men in particular, because they gave black women a pass in the situation. None of the things that they mentioned weren't things that you've heard Yvette Cornell say, TBA say, Tariq say, Boyce say, Dr. Claude Anderson say. Like, are we all in on this big conspiracy to trick the black voters into not voting or voting third party, or was it that deep, or they just didn't fuck with Hillary? Oversimplification, right? But Roland's gonna try to clean it up. It's not about separating us. No, the brother said his piece. He's biased, clearly. He's upset on some Drake shit that black folks didn't go out and get Crooked Hillary in the office. So even if he had legitimate arguments, he killed it by showing his bias. You should want black people to fight and negotiate their vote and get what they need best for themselves. And if they felt that was going to come from Bernie, if they felt that was going to come from Jill Stein, whatever, that's their right to do that as an individual. You don't get to dictate what their interests are or who they should go. You know, like, the arrogance of that is crazy.
Call her an Uncle Tom, which I've never called anybody, and I don't use those phrases. But the reality is, she's been running from me to debate me. She wants to debate him and Charlie Kirk. But that also tells you again how they're not serious. But here's the other thing. What does this also say, Malcolm? This is also critically important. What does this also say to the likes of Facebook, of Twitter, of Instagram? That also why it's important for them as they're sitting here funding news shows and doing things, also to be also funding credible black news sources who are actually real, because that was the other deal as well. When you have this gap here, this is a credibility issue. I know for my audience, they're like, Roland, we know you, we trust you, and we know what you're going to present. That's the other piece. People were accepting information. Oh, they got 100,000 followers, and they were Russians.
Right. And the biggest one, right? 366,000 followers, African Americans, right? Following a fake Russian site that was pumping out all of this information that subtly was pushing Trump and defaming even African American politicians. And this is what's interesting about the Russian intelligence services. They understand over in Russia and other parts of the world, conspiracy theory is rife. People believe those things, and we think that we were educated out of that. Now we're finding out that vast parts of our community will believe crazy things like sovereign citizen philosophy, that You don't have to be an American citizen. You can just declare that you belong to, the something or another nation, or that, your politicians are killing your babies. That theme that the African Americans are going through a genocide. Look, we're not stupid. Okay, we've developed in my family, as you know, served in the armed forces since 1864, nonstop up till today. We have paid for the American experiment to progress and to better itself. But we also need to be aware. Like I wrote in Plot to Destroy Democracy, I have 4 chapters on how Russia manipulates people and information, including a threat of assassination against myself 2 years ago. Yeah, 2017 at Politicon, and people were told to come see me be killed. And it turns out we had tracked it out to a VPN that was entering the United States in Denver, but was originating in St. Petersburg. So anyone who is a leader within our community or a loud voice, you're a threat. And those people are discredited, or they just build up a website and pretend to be African Americans or hire African Americans and manipulate you. Freedom of speech is manipulable in the same way that any other propaganda is. But your ability to critically process data and learn to use the education that our forefathers and ancestors died to give us, you can actually learn how to read and identify this propaganda. If it's too good to be true or it's too far outside the mainstream, you've been hustled.
So what do we do for 2020? Because the reality is the Russians they are not going anywhere. They want to keep Donald Trump in the White House.
Oh, yeah.
And so what do you suggest happens between now and the 2020 election, specifically as it relates to African Americans who I believe, and I think probably you as well, will be under vicious attack, targeting again by the Russians in 2020?
I'll tell you, sunlight is the greatest disinfectant for political propaganda and attempts to manipulate you. But the problem is the disseminating the word within our own community, right? Big shows like yours, great. Magazines like The Root, awesome. People see us on television all the time.
2020.
I'll tell you, they're on the Offset and Cardi B. Magazines like The Root, big shows like yours, great. Magazines like The Root, big shows like yours, great. Magazines like The Root community, right? Big shows like yours, great. Magazines like The Root, awesome. People see us on television all the time, but it doesn't filter down to the street level. And that's where the Russians are targeting. They're not targeting you. They're not talking to you and me. They're on the Offset and Cardi B Twitter.
You hear how fucking condescending and disrespectful that is. What he just said. It's you dumb niggas who did not like the candidate that the Democratic establishment put forth, and you're on some Cardi B Offset shit because you didn't embrace her. How disrespectful is that? Roland Martin's crying about Facebook, Google, and Instagram and all those places, partly because they won't give him a show, right? Get your personal shit out of this, Roland. But again, what's dangerous is that he's saying we need to hold them accountable to get rid of these Russian bots, aka you black people who comment in comment sections and give valid critiques of these politicians. That's not cool. Again, he's got his own butthurt issues because Facebook won't give him a show. But now he's like, well, y'all got responsibility to get rid of these bots. And what do we see? We see Twitter banning people who use the ADOS hashtag and getting their comments gone. We see Facebook removing content that had political commentary on it from black folks. Boyce Watkins has been attacked several times and shut down on Facebook giving political commentary. So, again, no matter what side you on, you should not co-sign that. Everybody should be able to have their voice, and if y'all disagree, I can disagree. But I don't know where else to go with this. The fact that he's saying that y'all on some Cardi B Offset shit because y'all didn't support Crooked Hillary. Meanwhile, Y'all got Cardi B being the voice of reason, and all the Democrats are sharing her Twitter feeds and her Instagram feeds because she's giving political commentary. So which is it? Is Cardi B the gutter dumb broad, or is she some beacon hope and voice that congressmen were debating upon sharing her uh, video of the government shutdown? Which is it?
Who were fighting America and who were blasting America for racism in the days of Paul Robeson. I'm not saying they were perfect, but the bottom line is they were calling America out rightfully when it came to racism.
Yeah.
Putin is a racist. Putin is a white nationalist.
Right. Unfortunately, the Soviet Union, when they supported Angela Davis and Paul Robeson, did it strictly for political propaganda purposes. They were really not in favor of Angela Davis, and the Black Panthers getting equality. They would just use that to show that the capitalist system was fundamentally racist. And now Russia has become that capitalist system. Russia is a fundamentally conservative nation. They hate gays. They hate viscerally blacks. And now they have become this supersized version of a fascist light nation run by a dictator who remembered that the Soviet Union created all of this anti-black propaganda and has archives of propaganda that they could use to put in let's just call him a fascist, an autocratic president of the United States who would be the first guy to start breaking down democracy. So, like my friends at the barbershop said, what do we have to lose? All of your rights, all of your ability to go on the street and not feel like you're going to be shot with cops. He's trying to get a special forces soldier off today who the military is charged with murder. On the same day that we're celebrating I think it's the 75th anniversary of the massacre by Germans of 84 American soldiers, including black soldiers in World War II. We just are being taken out of the norms by a group of people that is led by an ex-KGB officer. Remember them, the bad guys. And so we're being suckered. And the only way to get around that is people have to start confronting bad information. So when you hear someone in the street say, oh no, sovereign citizens have free rights under Donald Trump, which someone came on my Twitter feed to say that's silliness, right? An African brother. And I have to go, you're a moron. No, that's not the way it is. And that's the sunshine they cannot take. They cannot take being called out and shown what the facts are.
Well, it's the same thing when our people's like, oh my God, you're in the boule. Y'all control Black America. Shut up. It's just a lie. You're in the fraternity. Oh, you guys are the secret.
You're a moron. People that is led by an ex-KGB information. Someone came on my Twitter feed to say that's fake. They cannot take being called.
I slam them, the Illuminati, all these crazy people, because you're right.
That's not the way it is. And that's the sunshine they cannot take. They cannot take being called out and shown what the facts are.
Well, it's the same thing when our people's like, oh my God, you're in the boule. Y'all control Black America. Shut up. It's just a lie. You're in the fraternity. Oh, you guys are the secret society. I'm like, shut the hell up. I slam them, the Illuminati, all these crazy people, because you're right. It's planting seeds of distrust. And this is why, if all of our entertainers out there and our sports figures, it has to be literally a community saying we are going to have disinfectant and we're going to sit here and go after all of you and blast you and wipe you out, because they're trying to sow seeds of discontent to keep us from voting, because they know the power of our vote. And that's how in Michigan, he won in Pennsylvania, he won in Wisconsin, he won in Ohio, in North Carolina, in Florida, because Black people, our votes were down. I'm not saying the election was all about us, but when we don't vote in significant numbers, then our power is simply going to waste.
Right, absolutely. And African American women have led the way on that. They are the true base of the Democratic Party. And ladies, all right, it's time to talk some common sense into these guys' heads because they are literally following Russian propaganda.
And this is last point here. This is not a vote Democrat conversation. This is a vote conversation, and this is us being smart enough to understand how the Russians are using it was all about us. But when we don't vote in significant numbers, then our power is simply going to waste.
Right. Absolutely. And African American women have led the way on that. They are the true base of the Democratic Party. And ladies, all right, it's time to talk some common sense into these guys' heads because they are literally following Russian propaganda.
And this is last point here. This is not a vote Democrat conversation. This
was absolutely a vote Democrat conversation. You can't clean that up, my guy. This was absolutely a vote Democrat conversation. He said Jill Stein, Russian bot. She said Bernie Sanders, Russians made you do it. It ain't about voting for Trump, obviously. So what's the options left? Why did he uplift, like Roland Martin has done several times, black women for voting for Trump overwhelmingly? This entire conversation was about y'all being mad, Crooked Hillary didn't win, and finding somebody to point fingers at. And they call every black person who either sat out and chose not to vote, which is their right and their power, or those who voted third party, or those who even voted for Trump. That's their individual business. That's not your business to speak on. You can't come with the it's your right, it's about voting, when you just shitted on the people who voted third party. Roland Martin, you called black men stupid for voting for Trump. So how do you get to play both sides? How do you get to say, no, this is about everybody going out and vote, but then you shit on people who voted for the candidate you didn't want to vote for? This is your black boule right here. This is your black media. I'm out.